In this episode of Chop and Brew, a homebrew review on two smoked beers that are very different from one another. One is a traditional Grodziskie featuring 100% Weyermann oak smoked wheat, brewed by Ryan Schenian. The other, my own improvised freestyle of a smoked beer featuring alderwood-smoked malt from Sugar Creek Malting. Ryan and I taste the beers, talk about the recipes, and just rap a little bit about smoked beers in general. You can find the recipes for both of our beers, plus a bonus recipe for Ryan's Smoked Irish Red Ale featuring cherry wood smoked malt in the video description below. A quick reminder that homebrew review episodes of Chop and Brew are brought to you with support from Imperial Yeast. Their seasonal release A37 Pog is a Kvike strain that packs a tropical fruit punch and is available at homebrew suppliers the first week of March 2024. And as always, big smoky love to the Patreon party people. Join them in supporting the show at patreon.com/chopandbrew. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Chop and Brew. We're on the porch with Ryan Schenian.
Hey.
The smoke brother from a different smoke mother.
Right.
We're representing Camp Rauchbier, as always, this week in Rauchbier. Awesome, fun group on Facebook. We'll link below. We have a rare crossing of paths where we each actually have a smoked homebrew to present to each other. His, a little more classic, true, forgotten style, as it's called by Deja Brew,
right.
The Grodziskie.
See.
And I have the exact opposite of a classic style anything, a very freestyle and improvised, what I call a little Rauch Nick, which I'll explain in a minute. But first off, cheers. Let's start with yours, you think?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, so as Chip was saying, this is kind of my take on the historical Grodziskie style. This is 100% Weyermann oak smoked wheat malt, Czechs for hops, multi-step mash through my grandfather. And I've done this recipe a few times. This is my third iteration of it. Every time I've kind of tweaked and done a different yeast strain. I was just telling Chip, the first batch I did White Labs 029, which I really liked. I felt like it was still dry and really clean. The second batch I tried White Yeast 2565, and I felt like it was still a nice beer, but it also had a little bit more fruity estery character that I felt kind of combated a little bit with kind of the smoke aroma, and it wasn't as pleasant as I thought the first batch was. So this third iteration, I actually used 3470, which is definitely the driest of the three that I've made. Very clean. I really think it helps get that oak smoked wheat malt to pop that much more. And for a beer that's like 3%, it's definitely very dry, but it's not so dry that it's like champagne.
Right.
It's just a style that I really thoroughly enjoy, especially for, I guess you could say springtime here in February in Minnesota. But usually this time of year, it's a little bit colder and you want something with, a little bit of smoke to kind of get you through until the weather totally turns.
Yeah, we're playing hide and go seek here.
Right.
In the shadow is the still winter sun, but the springtime temperatures are kind of like...
Yeah, it's insane.
Talk to me about the smoke flavor you get from the oak smoked wheat versus one that you get maybe from the cherry wood or the alder wood or other ones you've had.
Yeah, I will say one thing I've noticed with the oak smoked wheat is I feel like the nose is really smoky, but a lot of times when I drink it, I feel like the flavor isn't quite the same as kind of the intensity of the smoke you get from the aroma.
Interesting.
Which is something I kind of very fascinating about this type of smoke malt. The flavor, it's really subtle, especially being this 100% oak smoked wheat. You would think that it would just be like so intense, almost like not even drinkable.
Right.
But it's just very subtle. You kind of have that wheat body that kind of comes through to kind of make everything kind of blend and kind of smooth things out. It just, for a 3% beer, it's delicious. I kind of think of it as kind of like a smoked Pilsner in a way, because it has that bitterness. It's super dry.
It is bitter.
But
the smoke almost comes off kind of tart-ish. To your point, you're like, is this smoke I'm tasting or some kind of other tart agent versus the nose where you're like, that smells smoky.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But yeah, I would say kind of when I viewed like beechwood, that I think a lot of people say like smoked meat is what a lot of people think of, like bacon, ham, things like that really comes through, and that's a very intense one. I would say cherrywood is another one that I've used a handful too. I have a cherrywood Irish Red that I like to make, and that I use a lot less percentage-wise in the grist compared to, say, Beechwood or even kind of the oak-smoked wheat malt.
Like how much percentage would that?
Probably 20%. I'd have to look at my recipe. 15,
Smoked
20%.
Irish
probably.
red. Is
Yes,
that something?
Yeah.
Whether or not you're brewing it this year, is this about the time you would brew it for St. Patrick's Day?
Absolutely. Usually this is the time that I do it. Chip and I were just both talking about how it's like being dads now. We can't have all the free time that we used to. So it's been on my to-brew list for quite a while, but just unfortunately haven't found the opportunity to make it happen. But yeah, usually by now I've already made that. It's usually in the keg by now and getting ready for St. Patrick's Day right around the corner here.
So what I brought to the table is a very weird. I kind of categorize this as like found footage beers. Other people would call them kitchen sink beers. This is an alderwood-smoked. I don't know. Maybe call it a Lil Martin.
That's what I said. To me, I thought with just smelling it and kind of initially tasting it, I thought it reminded me a lot of a Märzen.
The story behind this is we were brewing with some of the St. Paul homebrewer guys. Probably saw some video recap of this. We were brewing the Sammy Claus, the 14% quad bock is what I call it. And some of the runnings came out of that at about 10:30, 10:35. Did not want to just let them go. So that was found footage A, is the wort. Mm-hmm. Had some of this alderwood-smoked malt from Sugar Creek in Indiana that was just kind of hanging out in the brew cave at Northern Brewer. So I ran that through a quick mill. So now I have this wort. I'm steeping a bag of the smoked malt for about half hour at 153. I decide to bump up the gravity a little bit so it's not just this this small of a beer.
Right.
Little DME, and then whole leaf hops that Ross had brought to give away, trying to clean out his freezer. I was like, I'm going to put those whole leaf Hallertau middle brews in. Boiled for only 30 minutes, and then I threw Omega's German Lager 1 DKO. The DKO stands for diacetyl knockout. So this was something I was going to ferment at like ale temps anyway, because we've been learning so much about the German Lager 1, the 3470, right, through all the cold IPA stuff that's been going on. But like just more and more people are realizing that strain specifically can go real high. So I just wanted to kind of kick the tires on it. Plus it was German. We've got this German, Austrian kind of wort, these hops, now this. So what this ended up being is about a 1054 to 10006 beer. So about 6.3% ABV. What do you think, Mr. Smokey? Up against this one, I will say it's noticeably more malty and sweet. Like,
for sure.
When you have it only, you're like, oh, that's pretty dry and smoky. But up against that, I was like, oh, this tastes like banana bread.
Oh, right. Well, one thing I will say, I think was a great idea on your part to bump up the gravity a little bit on this with the DME, because just by tasting it, because the smoke does really dry things out a lot.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that you bumped up that ABV a little bit, it's not quite as dry. And I feel like if you had it kind of more that, 3% similar to this, it might be a little bit too dry and too smoky. This kind of helped kind of balance things out a little bit. But yeah, I definitely will say it's really interesting, and I'm trying to get better at kind of detecting the different types of flavor characteristics I get from each and every kind of smoked malt, because they are different, but I feel like they're so subtle sometimes it's really hard to like pinpoint exactly what it is.
Right.
To me, by drinking this, I feel like it's kind of reminiscent of a campfire is kind of the best descriptor that I kind of get when I have a sip of it. It is a delicious beer, and like I said, it's kind of like a little mini Märzen.
Yeah, I reverse engineered it through Beersmith just to see like what would this be based on the runnings and everything I threw at it. So it would have been like for a 3-gallon batch, like 2 pounds Munich, 2 pounds Pils, less than a full pound of smoked malt, less than a full pound of DME, Pils DME, 1 ounce of Carafa 3, just because there was that small of an amount in the giant mother brew. So yeah, it's kind of funny. Like usually I wouldn't even care, but for the sake of being able to maybe convince somebody to try something like this on purpose versus just falling into it. But that's still 13% smoked malt. And this alderwood smoked malt, I think we've both noticed, like at the Norwegian Brew Day when we got it from Jordan, his is a whole other beast. Like was like just so richly smoky. The color of that, I think it's like a 2-row malt, but by the time he's done with this process, it turns like the wort from it is amber.
It was definitely
more.
orange. Yeah, it was very orange colored. Yes.
Yeah, I get I like the smoke on the nose. I get a big taste of smoke up front. Then the middle is sweet to me, almost kind of caramel toffee-ish.
Yes, that's what I got in the nose as well as the caramel toffee bready.
Then the smoke though comes back. It's cool. It kind of like does like a bookend of smoke versus a fading of smoke.
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely does have that initial sip. You kind of get the smoke, and then it transitions to a bit of that toffee that you're talking about, and kind of that little bready character. But the finish dries out. And part of it could be just because it attenuated so well. You said 10.006 was kind of the finishing, so there's not a whole lot of residual sugar or body left, so it just gives that whole front row seat for the smoke showcase.
So just a fun thing. So I called it Little Rauch Nick since Sammy Claus is Sammy Claus. I was like, well, this is like Little Saint Nick, but Little Rauch Nick.
Right. I love it. But yeah, it is so interesting when you go back to this one.
Oh boy.
It is it's like bone dry compared to this one.
For sure.
Yeah.
A little less of that tartness though. Interesting how things can kind of cancel out and interplay. Absolutely. Now I just get more it almost tastes like what you said earlier, smoked pills.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
for sure.
It's slightly hazy, so it's more like almost like a smoked Keller beer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the carbonation of this probably could be bumped up a little bit, as they usually call the Grodziskie, the Polish champagne. But honestly, I think I like where it's at. I'd be a little maybe concerned of too much carbonic acid and a little bit too dry if I were to bump it up too much more. So I kind of like it where it's at.
All right, that's 2 smoked beers on the porch on a sunny afternoon. Tell us about your smoked beers adventure. Definitely check out This Week in Rauchbier. If you're on the old Facebooks, we'll link that below. Anything else you want to just say about smoked beers? Because you post a lot in that group.
I do. It's funny. I've always liked smoked beers, but I think being a part of this Week in Rauchbier group, I've actually gotten way more into kind of seeking out more, because you're also seeing other people post that, aside from just Schlenkerla, there's so many other breweries that are making smoked beer, and we're hoping that maybe others will catch on and see there's a fan base here. Maybe there will be some more breweries that'll start making these types of beers, but at least we've got 2 fans in the house right now. For sure.
And very different kinds of smoke. I mean, like you said, there can almost be, I don't know, campfire is too easy to say, but there's the smoked meat. Yep. I guess you could almost, some people say that creosote, where it's almost like pine. It's getting almost, right. I don't know what that word would be, resinous smoke a little bit. There's obviously no shortage of different fruit woods that it can be smoked with. Sugar Creek also does they smoke over lavender, they smoke over pimento, I think. They smoke a lot of
it's
I don't know if they still do, but I know when I first just came across them 3 or 4 years ago, they were doing all, you can almost call it spiced smoked, herbal smoked.
Yeah, I think that's just the fascinating thing about it, is it's kind of this new potential spot that so many places and people could kind of go to try all these different types of smoked malts, and it just make completely different beers than that are already on the marketplace.
I guess one thing I would say, if I were to try this again, I would try to not use the DME. I would try to just do it
as is.
Knock that out, probably just bump up the other 2, or maybe just bump up the pills, but yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I definitely think I could see a little bit maybe more Munich in here, something that's going to add a little bit more body, just partly because it dried out so much. Something to kind of give it a little bit more kind of mid palate. But no, honestly, it's delicious and super drinkable. I can see why your keg has disappeared so quickly.
It's like Smoketoberfest.
Yeah, absolutely, right? In February. It's 45 degrees outside.
All right, Rauch for Rauch.
Cheers.
And now we have water.
Smoked water.
Smoked water. Ooh, smoked water. Oh my gosh. Holy
A new idea
now,
for you, right?
Sparkling smoked water.
Right. Smoked seltzer.